Let me begin with something I learned very early in my life, something that completely changed the direction of my future. I discovered that the difference between average people and extraordinary people is not intelligence, talent, or even opportunity. The real difference is how they see themselves. The most successful people in the world make a decision long before anyone else believes in them to act like they are the best at what they do. And today, I want to talk to you about one simple but life-changing principle. Act like you're the best. Now, before we go deeper, let me ask you something very honestly. If you truly believed you were capable of becoming one of the best in your field, how differently would you think? How differently would you speak? How differently would you work every single day? I want you to pause for a moment and think about that question. And then go down to the comments and tell me, what is the one area of your life where you want to become the best? Career, your business, your studies, your skills, your mindset, what is it? Because the moment you make that decision, everything begins to change. You see, when I was younger, I was not successful. In fact, I failed in school, I worked low-paying jobs, and for many years I struggled just to get by. I had no special advantages. I wasn't the smartest person in the room. But one day I began studying the most successful people in business, in leadership, and in personal development. And I noticed something fascinating. The top performers behaved differently long before they achieved success. They carried themselves differently. They spoke with certainty. They prepared more. They learned more. They expected more from themselves. In other words, they acted like they were the best even before the world recognized them. And this is not arrogance. This is psychology. Your mind works from the inside out. The way you see yourself determines the way you act, and the way you act determines results you get. If you see yourself as average, you will behave in average ways. If you see yourself as someone who could become excellent, someone who could become exceptional, your actions begin to rise to that level. And here's something very important I want you to understand. Confidence does not come from success. Confidence comes from preparation and self-belief. Many people think they need success first before they can feel confident, but that is backwards. The people who eventually become the best develop confidence in advance. They prepare, they study, they practice, and they mentally rehearse success until confidence becomes part of their identity. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine two people starting the exact same job. The first person thinks, I'm just lucky to be here. I hope I don't mess this up. The second person thinks, I'm going to master this job. I'm going to become one of the best people in this company. Now think about how differently those two people will act. One will hesitate. The other will step forward. One will wait for instructions. The other will look for opportunities. One will do the minimum. The other will constantly improve. And over time, their results will be completely different. Not because they started differently, but because they thought differently. You see, every great performer develops what psychologists call a self-concept. Your self-concept is the collection of beliefs you hold about yourself. It determines what you think you deserve, what you think you can achieve, and how hard you are willing to work. And here is the rule. You will never outperform your self-concept for very long. If deep down you believe you are average, you will unconsciously pull yourself back to average results. But if you begin building the belief that you are capable of excellence, something extraordinary begins to happen. Your brain starts looking for ways to make that belief true. You start reading more. You start learning faster. You start observing successful people more carefully. You begin to ask better questions. And over time, you begin to close the gap between where you are and where the best people are. Let me tell you something that may surprise you. Most of the people you admire today started exactly where you are. They didn't begin as experts. They didn't begin as leaders. They didn't begin as the best. They simply decided they were going to become the best, and then they organized their life around that decision. Think about the top athletes in the world. Think about the best entrepreneurs. Think about the highest performing professionals. What separates them from the average person is not some mysterious talent. It is their commitment to mastery. And mastery begins with a decision. A decision that says, from today forward, I will act like a professional. I will act like someone who is committed to excellence. Now, this does not mean pretending to be perfect. It means committing to constant improvement. One of the greatest habits you can ever develop is the habit of asking yourself a simple question every day. What would the best person in my field do right now? If you are a student, ask yourself that question when you study. If you run a business, ask yourself that question when you make decisions. If you work in a company, ask yourself that question when you solve problems. Because that one question immediately raises your standards, and your standards determine your success. In my years of studying high performers, I discovered something remarkable. The best people set much higher standards for themselves than anyone else sets for them. They arrive earlier. They prepare more thoroughly. They follow through more consistently. They take responsibility for results. And perhaps most importantly, they never stop learning. You see, the moment you start acting like you're the best, you begin doing the things that the best people do. You become more disciplined. You become more focused. You become more intentional with your time. And here's the beautiful part. The results eventually catch up with the identity. But it starts inside your mind. Let me share another principle that changed my life. Your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. If you want better results, you must first become a better person in terms of your thinking, your habits, and your discipline. And acting like you're the best forces you to grow. Because when you hold yourself to higher standards, average behavior becomes uncomfortable. Procrastination becomes uncomfortable. Excuses become uncomfortable. And progress becomes addictive. Every day you begin asking yourself questions like, how can I do this better? How can I improve my skills? How can I create more value? Because ultimately, the marketplace rewards value. The people who earn the most money, gain the most respect, and create the greatest opportunities are the people who deliver the highest value. And the highest value always comes from the highest level of skill, which means your real job, no matter what career you choose, is to become extremely good at what you do. Not just good, extremely good. Top 10% good. Because once you enter the top 10% of your field, your life begins to change dramatically. Your opportunities increase. Your income increases. Your confidence increases. And the way you reach the top 10% is not luck. It is deliberate practice. It is continuous learning. It is the daily decision to act like a professional. Now here's another truth I want you to think deeply about. Nobody is born believing they are the best. That belief is built. It is built through repetition, through learning, through preparation, through small daily victories. Each time you push yourself to improve, your self-image becomes stronger. Each time you finish a task with excellence, your confidence grows. Each time you overcome difficulty, your belief in yourself expands. And slowly but surely, you begin to see yourself differently. You stop seeing yourself as someone who hopes for success. You begin seeing yourself as someone who creates success. And that identity shift changes everything. Because once you believe you are capable of greatness, you start making decisions that align with that belief. You stop wasting time on things that don't matter. You invest more energy into growth. You become more selective about your habits, your environment, and even the people around you. Because excellence is contagious, but so is mediocrity. And the people who become the best protect their mindset very carefully. They guard their focus. They guard their goals. They guard their belief in themselves. Now let me ask you another important question. What would happen to your life if starting today, you decided to act like someone who is destined to become the best in your field? Think about that for a moment. How would you wake up tomorrow morning? How would you approach your work? How would you treat your time? How seriously would you take your growth? Because that one decision could change the entire trajectory of your life. And in the next part, I'm going to show you the specific habits, mental strategies, and daily actions that allow ordinary people to rise to extraordinary levels. But first, I want you to make a quiet decision within yourself. Decide that average is no longer acceptable. Decide that you are capable of more. And most importantly, decide that starting today, you will begin acting like you're the best. Now let me continue with a principle that I consider absolutely fundamental to extraordinary success. If you want to act like you're the best, you must first learn to think like the best. Every high performer I have ever studied, whether in business, sports, leadership, or personal development, develops a very specific way of thinking about their work and their life. They take complete ownership of their future. They never wait for motivation. They create it. They never wait for permission. They prepare themselves so thoroughly that opportunity eventually has no choice but to appear. You see, the average person spends a great deal of time reacting to life, They react to circumstances, to problems, to other people's opinions, and often to their own fears. But the best performers do something very different. They act proactively. They decide in advance how they will think, how they will work, and what standards they will live by. And one of the most powerful habits you can develop is the habit of personal responsibility. When you begin acting like you're the best, you stop blaming circumstances. You stop blaming the economy. You stop blaming your past. Instead, you ask a much more powerful question. What can I do to improve this situation? The single question puts you back in control. Because the truth is, your power always lies in your response. You cannot control everything that happens in your life, but you can absolutely control how you respond to it. And the best people respond with growth. They respond with learning. They respond with action. Now let me share something that might challenge the way you think about success. The difference between the top 10% and the bottom 80% in almost every field comes down to habits. Not talent, not luck, habits. The best people develop disciplined routines that push them forward every single day. For example, they read more. Many of the most successful people in the world read at least 1 hour every day in their field. That may not sound extraordinary at first, but let me show you the power of that habit. If you read 1 hour a day in your field, you will read approximately 1 book per week. That is about 50 books per year. Within a few years, you will know more about your profession than the vast majority of people working in it. And that knowledge becomes power. It improves your decision making. It improves your confidence. It improves the value you bring to others. This is how expertise is built 1 hour at a time. Another habit of the best performers is preparation. Top professionals prepare for everything. They prepare for meetings. They prepare for presentations. They prepare for conversations. They prepare for opportunities that have not even appeared yet. And because they prepare so thoroughly, when the opportunity does arrive, they look confident and capable. But the truth is, their confidence comes from preparation. Let me tell you something very important. Luck often looks like preparation meeting opportunity. The person who seems lucky is usually the person who spent years preparing when nobody was watching. So if you want to act like you're the best, ask yourself this simple question every day. Am I preparing at the level of a top performer? Because preparation creates confidence, and confidence leads to decisive action. Now let's talk about another quality that separates the guest from everyone else. Focus. We live in a world filled with distractions. Notifications, messages, entertainment, endless streams of information competing for your attention. But the highest achievers protect their focus like a valuable asset. When they work with intensity. They eliminate distractions. They concentrate deeply on the task that produces the greatest value. And this is where many people make a mistake. They stay busy all day but accomplish very little of real importance. Being busy is not the same as being productive. The best people identify their most valuable tasks, the tasks that create the greatest results, and they give those tasks their full concentration. If you want to dramatically increase your success, begin every day by asking yourself this question. What is the most valuable use of my time right now? Then discipline yourself to start there. When you consistently focus on high-value activities, your results begin to multiply. Now there is another powerful mindset that the best performers develop, and it is this. They fall in love with improvement. Average performers try to avoid difficulty. Top performers seek it. They understand that every challenge is an opportunity to grow stronger. When they encounter a problem, they don't ask, why is this happening to me? Instead, they ask, what can this teach me? That single shift in thinking transforms obstacles into opportunities. And over time, those small improvements compound into extraordinary results. Let me explain something that I often share with leaders and professionals around the world. Success is not an event. Success is a process. It is the result of small disciplines practiced consistently over time. Every time you choose to study instead of scrolling, every time you practice instead of procrastinating, every time you improve your skills instead of making excuses, you are strengthening the identity of someone who acts like the best. And identity drives behavior. When you start seeing yourself as a professional, your standards rise automatically. You begin paying attention to details. You follow through on commitments. You deliver quality work even when nobody is watching. And this is something the marketplace notices. Employers notice it. Clients notice it, colleagues notice it, because excellence stands out. In fact, excellence is surprisingly rare. Most people settle into comfortable routines. They do enough to get by, enough to maintain their position, but rarely enough to truly stand out. But the moment you begin acting like someone who is committed to excellence, you separate yourself from the crowd, and opportunities begin appearing. Promotions, new connections, new ideas, new possibilities, all because you raised your standards. Now let me share another important idea. The best people think long term. Average performers focus on immediate comfort. Top performers focus on future rewards. They are willing to sacrifice short-term ease for long-term success. They are willing to study when others relax. They are willing to practice when others procrastinate. They are willing to persist when others quit. And over time, those small sacrifices create enormous advantages. Think about it this way. Imagine improving your skills by just 1% each day. That might seem small at first, but improvement compounds. 1% better every day leads to massive growth over time. Within a year, you could become dramatically more skilled, more confident, and more capable than you are today. But it begins with a decision. The decision to stop thinking like an average performer and start thinking like someone who intends to become the best. Let me also talk about something that often holds people back: fear of failure. Many people hesitate to act boldly because they are afraid of making mistakes. But the truth is, mistakes are the tuition you pay for success. Every successful person has made countless mistakes. The difference is that they learn from them. They adjust. They improve. They move forward with greater wisdom. When you begin acting like you're the best, you stop seeing failure as something personal. You start seeing it as feedback, information that helps you grow. And that mindset gives you a tremendous advantage, because while others hesitate, you continue moving forward. While others fear mistakes, you are gaining experience, and experience builds mastery. Now let me ask you another question that could change the way you approach your life. What if every challenge you face right now is actually preparing you for a higher level of success? What if the difficulties you experience are strengthening the exact skills you will need in the future? If you adopt that perspective, you begin welcoming growth instead of resisting it. And that mindset is incredibly powerful, because people who welcome growth become unstoppable learners. They constantly upgrade their skills, constantly improve their thinking. They constantly move closer to excellence. And remember, excellence is not reserved for a special group of people. It is available to anyone willing to commit to the process of continuous improvement. Anyone willing to raise their standards. Anyone willing to act like the best long before the results appear. And in the next part, I'm going to show you the deeper mental conditioning and daily disciplines that transform this mindset into unstoppable momentum. Because once you truly internalize these principles, your confidence, productivity, and results begin rising to levels you may have never imagined before. Now let me bring everything together with one final principle that separates people who simply dream about success from those who actually achieve it. Consistency. Acting like you're the best is not something you do once in a while. It is not a temporary burst of motivation. It is a daily commitment to a higher standard of thinking, working, and living. And this is where the real transformation happens, because the moment you decide to act like the best every single day, you begin building momentum. At first, the changes may seem small. You wake up a little earlier. You focus a little longer. You study a little harder. You practice a little more deliberately. But over time, those small improvements compound into something remarkable. Your skills begin to sharpen. Your confidence begins to grow. Your reputation begins to spread. Anatto. Suddenly, people begin seeing you differently. They begin describing you as disciplined, reliable, focused professional. But what they are really seeing is the result of thousands of small decisions you made when nobody was watching. You see, excellence is not something you perform occasionally. Excellence is something you practice consistently. And when you commit to that standard, something very powerful begins to happen inside your mind. You start trusting yourself more. Because every day are proving to yourself that you can follow through, that you can stay focused, that you can continue improving even when things are difficult. And self-trust is one of the most powerful forces in personal development. When you trust yourself, you stop doubting every decision. You stop second-guessing your potential. You start moving through life with greater certainty. Now, let me share something that I believe is absolutely critical for anyone who wants to reach the top of their field. Surround yourself with people who think bigger. Environment shapes behavior more than most people realize. If you spend most of your time with people who complain, avoid responsibility, and settle for average results, it becomes extremely difficult to maintain a mindset of excellence. But when you spend time around people who are ambitious, disciplined, and committed to growth, your standards begin to rise naturally. You begin having better conversations. You begin hearing better ideas. You begin seeing what is possible at a higher level. And slowly your vision expands. One of the fastest ways to accelerate your growth is to study people who are already where you want to be. Read their books. Listen to their interviews. Observe how they think. Ask yourself constantly, what are they doing differently? Because success leaves clues. The strategies, habits, and mindsets that create success are not secrets. They are patterns repeated again and again by high performers across every industry. Okay. The more closely you study those patterns, the faster you can apply them in your own life. Now I want to talk about something that often determines whether a person continues growing or slowly drifts back into mediocrity. Comfort. Comfort is one of the greatest enemies of excellence. The moment things start going well, many people relax their standards. They stop pushing themselves. They stop learning aggressively. They stop seeking improvement. And slowly, without realizing it, their growth begins to slow down. But the best performers never become comfortable with staying the same. They constantly ask themselves questions like, how can I improve this? How can I perform at a higher level? How can I create more value? Because they understand something very important. The world is always moving forward. Skills are always evolving. Industries are always changing. And the people who remain committed to growth are the ones who continue rising. This is why lifelong learning is one of the greatest advantages you can give yourself. Never stop learning. Never stop improving. Never stop upgrading your skills. Even after decades of experience, the most successful individuals I know continue reading, studying, and refining their thinking every single year. They understand that growth is not a phase. Growth is a lifestyle. Now let me share another mental discipline that can dramatically increase your success. Visualization. The highest performers often spend time mentally rehearsing their success. They imagine themselves performing at their best. They imagine delivering excellent results. They imagine overcoming challenges with confidence and clarity. And what happens is fascinating. Your mind begins accepting that image as part of your identity. When the real situation arrives, your brain recognizes it as familiar territory. You respond with greater confidence because you have already seen yourself succeed in your imagination. This is why Olympic athletes, top entrepreneurs, and world-class performers use visualization regularly. Your brain does not always distinguish clearly between vividly imagined experiences and real ones. And when you repeatedly visualize yourself acting like the best, you begin reinforcing that identity. Now let me give you one final practical strategy. Every evening, take a few minutes to review your day. Ask yourself 3 simple questions. What did I do well today? What could I improve? What is the most important thing I must focus on tomorrow? This simple habit creates continuous improvement. It keeps your attention on progress instead of distraction, and it ensures that every day becomes a stepping stone toward excellence. Because remember this, success is not built in giant leaps. It is built in daily improvements, day by day, habit by habit, decision by decision. And if you stay committed long enough, something incredible happens. The gap between you and the average performer becomes enormous. Your skills become sharper. Your discipline becomes stronger. Your thinking becomes clearer. Your confidence becomes unshakable. And people begin looking at you as someone who is highly capable, highly reliable, and highly effective. But the truth is simple. You didn't suddenly become extraordinary. You simply chose day after day to act like someone who was committed to becoming the best. Now before we finish, I want to ask you one final question. What if 5 years from now you could look back and see that this was the moment you decided to raise your standards? The moment you decided that average was no longer acceptable? The moment you chose discipline over distraction, growth over comfort, excellence over excuses, because that decision made today could change the entire direction of your future. So here is what I want you to do. Starting tomorrow morning, act like the best version of yourself. Work with focus. Study with intensity. Improve your skills relentlessly. Protect your mindset. Raise your standards. And most importantly, keep going even when progress feels slow. Because if you stay committed to this path long enough, the results become inevitable. You begin becoming the person you once only imagined. And when that happens, you will realize something powerful. The real secret was never about pretending to be the best. The real secret was becoming the kind of person who earns that title through daily action.